Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of That Triathlon Show, the podcast presented by scientifictriathlon.com. I'm your host, Michael, and I'm joined here today by Coach James Teagle. How are you, James?
Hey, I'm good, thanks, Michael. Yep, glad to be on the show, and looking forward to having a good discussion.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. We're going to discuss the coronavirus or COVID-19 and how to deal with that. But we've had a lot of questions about that just in the last couple of days. Have been getting quite a few emails on how to deal with changes in race schedules, postponements, cancellations, and what to do in terms of training. Pools are closing. I'll just quickly thank our sponsors before we get into the discussion. And as usual, we have Precision Hydration that you can find on precisionhydration.com. Perhaps you are now stuck on the indoor trainer for even longer than you planned. The spring weather might be looking really nice, but depending on where you live, maybe the indoor trainer is the only option because some countries are actually not even allowing you to go outside and ride your bike. So keep hydrated, folks. Precision Hydration and their electrolyte products can help with that. So check them out on precisionhydration.com and use the discount code ThatTriathlonShow15 to get 15% off. And thank you to Roka that you can find on roka.com. And they are manufacturers of all sorts of products in the endurance sports categories from wetsuits, tri-suits, swimskins, goggles, high-performance eyewear, also now including prescription glasses. So they've got a lot of different things to offer. Maybe if you're stuck working from home, you have a little bit more time to kill, then some online shopping might be a good pastime to pass the time with. We got a special discount code that you can get on the landing page roka.com/TTS that will give you 20% off your order. So thank you, Roka and Precision Hydration. And now let's get on with our discussion, James. So
Right.
Let's start with your experience from this weekend. You were supposed to race and you were traveling, but that didn't come about. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it was a pretty fun trip. So I was supposed to be racing in a World of a European Cup in Spain yesterday, actually. So yesterday being Sunday, and I got to the event and got to Spain and was told it was cancelled. Then things changed pretty quickly after that because they declared a state of emergency in Spain and. I was pretty lucky. I decided to get out. I decided to drive to the airport and get an airport hotel and managed to get a flight on the Saturday and was lucky enough to get out. But I know a lot of athletes are still there and, probably in lockdown now. They're not really able to go outside and, it's a bit of a, it's not a great situation to be in. But, there are obviously a lot worse situations at the moment. This virus is killing people and, I'm obviously very lucky to be healthy and out, and I think we've got to take into perspective that the triathlon is a sport, and it's really enjoyable. But actually, when it comes to some things, there are more important things out there. Your health being one of them. So I'm just happy that I'm healthy, and I'm back in the UK, and actually able to continue doing what I like at the moment. Anyway.
Yeah, and the European Cup races, for listeners that might not be aware, they are part of the Sprint and Olympic distance race series that fall under the ITU, the International Triathlon Union banner. So that's what James is focusing on, and the highest level there being the World Triathlon Series. And I know that that's been your goal for this year to get a start in one of those WTS World Triathlon Series races. How does this impact? What do you know about the upcoming European and World Cup races that you might have had on your radar to race in? Is it still up in the air? How does this affect your training and racing planning?
So I suppose, like everyone, look, I don't really know. The ITU have said that there's no racing till the end of April. So every race that I was supposed to be doing is has basically gone. I had flights to Brazil and some other places. And obviously, I can't race them. So yeah, that is up in the air. I don't really know anyone. No one really knows how long this is going to go on for. I've heard different things on the media. Everyone's obviously been looking at it. But yeah, no one's really sure how long this is going to go on for. At the moment, I think it's probably time to just go back to basics and just think about actually what makes you a good athlete, and what can you do in this time when it is so unpredictable to make you the best athlete when race season does restart. Because one thing's for sure, that the athletes who are the most consistent and manage to come out the other end of this fit will have a fantastic race season, whenever that is, because at some point race season will restart, um, and we're just going to make sure we're ready for that.
Yeah, that is a fantastic summary. I sent an email to the athletes that I coach on Friday and said something that was very much the same as what you just said there. What does that mean? To give an example, what does that mean specifically for you? What, if any, sort of changes are you making to your training now that with this uncertainty, or can you describe if your training philosophy sort of changes now to more base training again, or is it just to elaborate on that a
Yeah,
little
so
bit?
so for me, obviously, I was going into race season. I was getting quite specific with my training. Really thinking about things like biking off a swim. Doing sessions at threshold. Actually, this is the pace I'm trying to race at. That kind of stuff. And at the moment, because I'm not racing, I think it is a good idea to go back into base period. Certainly, the athletes that I coach, we're going to have this discussion. I haven't managed to speak to them all because this is I've managed to speak to them over WhatsApp, but actually to have this conversation face to face, because it has been so fast moving. I think it's taken a lot of people by surprise. But yes, I think at the moment the best thing to do would be to go back and do some base training, really work on your general fitness, because we don't know what the races are going to be when we come out the other side of this. If you're targeting a 70.3, perhaps that 70.3 is moved, and maybe now you'll want to do an Olympic. I kind of think of this as the analogy of, potentially you had quite a serious injury, and, you don't really know when you're going to recover, but when you come out the other end of it, you're going to want to race again, and you're going to want to be competitive. So, the best thing at the moment is, think about your general fitness, think about your general health, don't do anything that's going to endanger other people. But, if you can really work on your base fitness, try and get some cycling miles in on turbo maybe, and, some miles in on, running if you can, and if you're lucky enough to have access to a pool, then get into the meters. But at the moment, I don't think anyone can be really specific about that training because they don't know when they're going to be racing again. But we do have that. We do have that ideal that the endurance sport is something that your body can do. You don't have to have weeks and weeks of specific training. So potentially, if race season came down, and for some reason it started again in a month's time, you could get ready for that off the back of a good base period. Whereas if you're just doing very specific stuff, you potentially lose some of that engine, some of that aerobic fitness. Then it is hard. So I think the best thing to do at the moment is keep that aerobic fitness topped up, and then when race season does restart, you will be able to make the most of it.
Yeah, I agree. And in many cases, of course, it depends a bit on the person and their background and the race. But 3 or 4 weeks of specific training, that is plenty to build, like to top up your sort of race readiness. But having that long period of base training, that is at the end of the day, that's going to make 80% of your performance, or if not more. So that makes sense, and I think that's actually a common question that I get is, well, if you don't know exactly if you're racing, let's say June, beginning of June, so 2.5 months from now is going to go ahead, when should you start to perhaps be more specific about training? And I think that in many cases it might make sense to start to be more specific and move away from this refocus on base building later rather than sooner, because that gives you more time to actually get confirmation that the race is actually going to go ahead and it's not going to be postponed, that too. And because of the fact that, as I said, I think that you can do a lot in a fairly limited time when it comes to that higher end training if you have that really solid aerobic base. Do you agree with that?
I do agree with that, and I think when it comes down to whenever race season does restart, at the moment, one of the lessons a lot of athletes are probably learning is, it's quite mentally hard when, you've been training all winter for a race, and then suddenly, it gets taken away from you. Obviously, in the grand scheme of things, that's nothing compared to what's going on in the world. But, actually, it is tough. So I think, being realistic, but because we don't know when race season is going to restart, is to give yourself the best chance doing that base period, and not really focus too much on actually, what events are going to go ahead and what aren't. Is actually, if you get a month out and obviously, this crisis calms down and races start going ahead again, then that's great. But until that point, just focus on what you can control. Your aerobic fitness, how fit you are, and don't let yourself get excited about races that are quite potentially going to get cancelled, because it is a real, it's really hard on you. You're training hard, and actually, if that race gets cancelled, it does affect you mentally. And if you're not mentally ready to train properly, then you're gonna have some real issues training and just keeping that aerobic base up. I think it's time to really understand why you do the sport. Hopefully most people do it because they enjoy it, and actually make the most of enjoying it. Getting in a solid aerobic base, and just doing what you can to ensure you are fit whenever race season does restart.
So for you, is that the way that you cope with this mentally, that you just sort of tune into the pure enjoyment of being out on your bike? Because I know you can go out on your bike still in
Yes,
the UK, and you
yes.
can go out to run. So that's sort of like the best mental coping strategy for you in this situation. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, for me, I love riding my bike, and I love running. So at the moment, I've come up with a plan, and I've written down that this is what I want to get out of certain sessions, and essentially it comes down to actually just trying to build up that engine again. For me, I was ready to race. I was really fit and ready to race. But actually, you can only control what you can control. And building up the engine, making a few mistakes I actually made in the winter block better. So, for example, I'm looking at it and going, well, I said I wanted to do a lot of stuff regarding running economy, and stuff in the gym, and obviously, access to gym is one of those things that's probably going to get limited over the next few weeks. But actually, running economy and run drills and that kind of stuff, I said I wanted to do it, but I didn't actually do it. So maybe I go and do it now and make sure that actually I make the block I just did even better, so I can learn from the block I just did, and take those learnings, take the mistakes I made, and actually implement them in this block. In terms of things that I said I wanted to do, but I didn't. But yeah, for me, going forward, it is around enjoyment at the moment. Enjoying riding my bike, enjoying running, and just training to keep myself fit. Which is something I do because I love the sport, and a lot of the listeners will be the same. They like competing, but actually like doing the sport, and so just training at the moment is not the worst thing in the world, because I know that race season will come at some point.
No, definitely not. I think it's a way for us to help deal with the bigger stress of everything that's going on. And a lot of people might be in a situation where they're not able to work physically at their office, not see their coworkers, and maybe that can be fun
Yeah.
for some time. But if you have a family and you're potentially all stuck quarantined at home, or your kids aren't allowed to go to school because a lot of countries are closing down schools, then that can be really stressful. And the ability to then go out for a bike ride and be outdoors, that I think can be a huge stress relief and beneficial from just the overall health and mental health perspective.
Yeah, I mean, riding your bike, will help you in those situations. Obviously you are going to get, it's going to be a funny couple of months, isn't it? Actually getting out and just doing something you enjoy is probably the best thing you can do, to alleviate those problems. Just take your mind off it. Obviously everyone's in different circumstances, whether or not they can go outside, but you got things like Zwift. Some people have got treadmills. I'm not sure whether countries are stopping people from running outside. But you can just do what you can, but triathlon should be something that is there for you to enjoy, and just take the stress out of the moment, really. Yeah.
And speaking of Swift, I know that a lot of people, and I'm thinking about this myself actually, I haven't really made a decision on it, but Swift racing might be a bit of a substitute for races that are cancelled. Is that something that you've been discussing with your athletes, and that some of your athletes might be getting into?
Yeah, I think so. In terms of athletes who really want to press forward with something, they do want some kind of benchmarking. So whether I want them to do some kind of benchmarking as well, whether or not it's testing, whether or not it's racing, something just to measure performance and measure, how they're improving. Because, obviously when you're training, you want to improve somehow. And, if you can measure that, but yes, something like Zwift racing, I think is on the cards for a lot of athletes. It's a bit of fun. I think it's something that was worth pursuing, for sure, especially if you got, good turbos and good equipment, and you actually quite enjoy that kind of virtual racing. I think they're probably having a bit of a boom at the moment. The other thing we've spoken around is, time trials. Just, if you are able to ride outside, do things like time trials, or maybe, time trial running, yeah, that kind of stuff. Something to keep yourself motivated, keep yourself racing, and, just ensure that, you are progressing.
Yeah. And one of the big questions that we need to discuss, of course, is pools that are closing in many countries. And I assume that this is happening already for a lot of your athletes. How are you dealing with that? What's the best way to replace that swimming, or what can you do in this situation?
Yeah, it's happened to a lot of the athletes I'm coaching. It seems to have happened all over. Just this weekend, everyone's pools seem to have closed. So, well, there's not much you can do around actually swimming. One of the magical things about, we talk about quite a lot is feel for the water, and there's not much you can do about that when you're not able to swim. I think a lot of initial reactions from athletes was, well, I can go in a lake, and I was like, well, it's 8 degrees in that lake. You don't really want to be swimming in that at the moment. I know some people do, but look, you can't do anything about it in terms of, if you can't swim, you can't swim. You can do things around bodyweight exercises, just maintain some strength, some upper body strength, because of a lot of the things we're going to be doing are lower body, running and cycling, because you are still able to do them. So I think doing a bit of upper body stuff and some upper body exercises where you can is not a bad idea, just to make sure that you are keeping some of that strength in. Some mobility. The kind of stuff you're going to do when you're running and riding is not going to be great if you're doing a lot of it and then you want to get back in the pool. So at some point, so just making sure you're keeping your thoracic mobile, your shoulders mobile, that kind of stuff. For when you do get access to the pool again. In terms of swim specific fitness, you spoke about it in the last episode you did. There is a crossover effect between sports. So although you might not be able to swim, you can still maintain your fitness, but doing cycling and running. So actually, what I'm going to do with most of my athletes is, look, we don't have access to a pool. There's not much we can do about that. Some of you are lucky enough to be able to swim away from water, if you're allowed to go outside. So we'll do that. But actually, it's a great opportunity to work on your cycling and your running. And then when you actually come back to being able to use the pools again, a lot of the athletes in your area will be in the same boat. They wouldn't have been in the pool either. Is actually to do some more focused swimming. So actually work on swimming as a block, get that swimming back up to a decent level by doing a few more sessions we had done. But that will be compensated by the fact that actually we spent a bit more time on the bike and a bit more time running in the intervening months. I don't know what your ideas are, but that's where I'm going with that.
Yeah, I would agree. I was looking through my list of athletes, and I'm surprised by how few still have had pool access removed from them, because most of my athletes still have pool access.
Oh, really?
Based on where they are. I have a couple of athletes in Brazil. The ones that I have in the United States, they are losing access to the pool. But in Europe, I have athletes in the UK where obviously the pools are still mostly open, I believe.
Yep.
And then some other places around Europe that they are still open, some that they are closed. But basically, more than half of my athletes still have pool access, so that's a good thing. But for those that don't, I totally agree. I think my planning is to tend to actually, we will add some running, but mostly we'll add cycling, and I think that's primarily just to make sure that we don't get any running injuries. If we increase running volume, we will do that much more gradually than we can increase cycling volume. And also I think that there's some interesting work around how running actually, in addition to the musculoskeletal stress that you get from it, also the sympathetic stress that you get from it, the central nervous system response, is much greater than what you get from cycling or swimming. So that's something that I just recently caught on to, and but that's something to consider. So running, yes, I will increase that, but mostly cycling, and I think that they will benefit running as well in the long run by doing a solid bike block for most of the athletes. Some of them definitely will do some Swift racing, and some of them might prefer to do a lot of outdoors riding, which might be less structured and just fun, and that's totally fine for building that base. And yes, as you said, I think that once the pools open up again, doing a swim focused block, that's probably the way to go to get back some of those losses that you have incurred in your swim.
Yeah, I think I just want to pick up on that point. So, increasing run volume and increasing bike volume at the same time, I'm speaking from experience here. You got to be careful. So just because your pool is closed, don't throw in loads of extra run volume this week and loads of extra ride volume at the same time, especially the run volume. But remember that it's still stress on the legs to be riding. So just be careful about how quickly you progress that. I can see a lot of athletes getting injured around, doing too much too soon because you're like, well, I can't swim, so I'm just going to go and run, or ride and run, and actually that it does lead to injuries, and it's quite one of the big problems I see. And, a big red flag for me is actually increasing both of those at the same time quite quickly. So yes, I'd do it over a controlled manner, but definitely be very careful about how quickly you increase both of them. Is my advice, and it's probably a bit annoying because you're like, well, I can't swim, and actually I want to bring my volume up a bit more, but you definitely don't want to increase them too quickly, else you'll get injured as well, and you won't be able to swim, bike, or run. So yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, it comes back to what you mentioned there about just keeping up the consistency as best you can. So not getting injured is rule number one when it comes to being consistent. All right. And is there anything else that we haven't covered? I feel that we've covered most. There aren't any magic solutions to this. We can only control what we can control, and that's what we need to try to do. What about open water swimming for those that have access to something better than an 8-degree lake? Let's say you have a 15-degree lake that is actually swimmable in a wetsuit. Do you think that that's something that is works well to incorporate regularly, and is that something that you would prescribe to your athletes?
For sure. I mean, if you've got access to that and you're lucky enough to have, live in one of those countries at the moment that are quite warm, then yeah, I mean, I'm going to encourage athletes in that situation to use the open water. Now, obviously, we can't do exactly the same sessions, but we can pretty much replicate, what we're trying to get out of those sessions in the open water, with some adaptations. So, if you're lucky enough to have open water, but your pools are closed, then yes, I think it's a good idea to go out open water swimming. Obviously be safe, but actually making the most of that. A lot of athletes do get anxiety around that open water swimming aspect. So I think doing a bit more open water swimming is not a bad thing. Hopefully helps control that anxiety. Learn some new skills. If you're living near the sea, then surfing the waves, that kind of thing, or a bit of sighting. Actually a lot of athletes struggle with basics of that. Sighting things, going in the wrong direction, not going the most direct routes of buoys, all those things that are very specific to triathlon, but potentially, because you can get higher quality sessions potentially, arguably out of a pool, or less down the order of things that you want to achieve, but actually getting in some open water swimming, getting good at those open water skills now, is something that you'll have, you should have for the rest of your sporting career. So I don't see that as a bad thing at all. Make the most of it. Go out and do some open water swimming for sure.
Yeah, and another thing that I would add to that is that for some athletes, especially those that aren't as proficient swimmers, I sometimes see like a big discrepancy in the fitness they have in the pool and compared to what they can actually do in the open water. There is maybe some pacing issues there that it's more difficult to know how hard you can go for, let's say, 1,500 meters in the open water compared to what your fitness actually is. So there might be some underpacing in races and underperforming in races because of that. And I think that's something that some hard work in the open water can help with as well, to get a better feel for how hard you should go in the open water when you don't have the flags and the black line to follow and take as your benchmarks for how fast you're going. You just need to be more in tune with with the effort that you're putting out. And I think that can be a very beneficial thing as well in the open water.
Yeah, I mean that's where your race is going to be. So you need to get good at it if you want to make the most of your sporting career. Do well in triathlon. It's great being a pool swimmer. You see it even at elite levels. Great pool swimmers. You put them in the open water and they're terrible. So making the most of that is definitely not a bad thing. And if you got the access to open water, go out and practice those skills, practice your pacing, practice your sighting. Practice just feeling comfortable in open water.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. One more thing that I thought of that we can tackle here just briefly. We've discussed this, of course, in a previous episode on base training, but since we mentioned that going back to more of a base training period now might be a good idea, can you just give a quick summary of what that might look like? For example, what does it look like for you when you're doing base training? Is it only long, slow distance, or how are you incorporating some sort of intensity or quality training into that?
So, it does kind of depend on your background. If you've not got a lot of time in the sport, then your base training is going to look slightly different to what I do. But yeah, generally when it comes to base training, I take out the threshold reps and I actually go back and I look at trying to get the volume in as a priority, really trying to get some low aerobic volume in. We're trying to build up that fitness, really, that aerobic fitness, without doing anything too specific. So the benefits of that are obviously building aerobic fitness, but also a bit of muscular endurance. Your ability to use fats for training, all the energy and metabolism things that you get out of those long endurance reps, but also just making you a generally fitter athlete. For me, I will incorporate some intensity where you probably some people deem it intensity. It'll be around that kind of tempo. First threshold kind of efforts. I'll incorporate a bit of that because actually I think that's very important when you do come back to race season, that those tempo efforts are there, and actually doing that first threshold stuff will increase your aerobic fitness quite quickly. I'll also include a bit of fartlek stuff, so things around to be fair around threshold when you're running, but very above it and very below it, just trying to maintain that basic fitness, trying to get myself ready for it. Actually I need to do some specific work around threshold. That definitely comes into it. Around the swimming, I think it's important to maintain some intensity in the swimming if you've got access, obviously if you've got access to a pool, because unlike the other events, we are generally a bit more above threshold there. Technical aspect is more important. So actually the ability to swim hard with good technique is something that you need to be able to do. So we'll incorporate a bit more intensity there. But generally, yes, you're looking at high volume but lower intensity in general. But tweak it for each athlete and what your strengths are and actually what event you're going to be doing. If you're doing a sprint distance, your training should look very different to doing an Ironman. Obviously, at this time of year, it probably looks less different than if you're doing specific stuff, but it should look different.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, just one thing that I would add to that is that for some athletes, for example, if they were building up to a race that is going to happen in the very near future, like 1 to 2 weeks from now, I have a couple of cases like that, and the races were cancelled. So they've now the last few weeks done quite a high training load in terms of volume and intensity in the last few weeks of preparation. And I want to make sure that, we sort of stabilize them now that they're not racing and get them to a state of being more in the green, so to say, than in the yellow that they were in that last build phase. So what I do now is to temporarily, for a couple of weeks, maybe reduce all intensity on the remove all intensity on the bike and the run for a couple of weeks, and then gradually introduce the tempo stuff, just as you mentioned. But what I will probably retain every single week, at least some of, is a little bit of leg speed, so like strides on the run, and maybe some high cadence work on the bike and that sort of thing, just because that neuromuscular aspect, I think, is something that is very important. So even if you are somebody who might be newer and you might benefit from actually doing almost only long, slow distance, then that's something that I would still incorporate every week at least once, but maybe even more so than once, some sort of neuromuscular and leg speed exercises.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's very important. Obviously, at some point, like we keep saying, you are going to be back racing again. I think it is important at the moment to, kind of switch that mentality to actually, we're trying to get that consistent training in again. It's obviously going to be hard for some athletes who are about to race, but it is a switch of mentality. Actually, doing a bit of aerobic volume without too much intensity, if you're not racing for a couple of months, is not going to hurt you at all. And just making sure that you are in that green zone and not at risk of injury, not at risk of burnout, is very important. Generally, if we were in this position, coming off a normal season, you'd probably have taken a couple of weeks rest before you come into a base period like this. just because of the way the seasons work. So I think it's important to remember. The other thing we don't want to get is burnout. I'm a bit concerned that you look at the season, and at the end of the season, I know myself in particular. At the end of the season, I'm shattered. I want that rest. And one of the things we don't want to do is to train really hard and get to whenever races actually restart, and then a couple of weeks later being like, I'm done. I want to take my rest period. So I think it's important we avoid that burnout as well, just to ensure that when the season does restart, we can make the most of it.
Yeah, definitely. It's better to err a bit on the side of being 90% fit rather than 101% fit. And then as soon as you get the green light that the season is restarting again, then you have that motivation and you can still make the most of your fitness that you have. One more question on the base training aspect when we talk about this easy aerobic training. Do you think there is a lower limit for how easy that aerobic training should be? And this might be very different when we compare the different disciplines. So what are your thoughts on that?
Is there a lower limit to how easy it should be? It kind of depends on the aim of a session. For some sessions, if it's a long steady run, then no. If the aim of a session is to get in the aerobic fitness, some time at just moving, trying to get the heart rate up, trying to get you actually physically your heart beating, your blood pumping around your body, then not particularly. Obviously, if you're going too slow, you won't get as many adaptations as you would. I'm talking, you're walking basically. It also depends on your training volume. If you're doing a high amount of volume, because you're lucky enough to be able to do that, then doing sessions too hard, if you're doing that kind of volume, will mean that you're not able to complete the block. I think that a lot of athletes obviously doing around 8 to 10 hours a week. Some are doing quite a lot, doing up to 14, but age group athletes, they've got things going on in their lives outside, like work. Then maybe potentially even going into that tempo zone is not a bad thing on their aerobic sessions, just because you'll be able to recover. The volume you're doing is not massively high. You'll be able to keep that consistency in. But it really comes down to actually, are you able to do the training consistently, and are you able to get out of the sessions what you're trying to achieve? If you're going into a session that was, for example, a high intensity session, and you were too tired to do it because you've done your aerobic stuff too hard, then obviously that defeats the purpose of doing both those sessions. You should have gone easier on the aerobic stuff so you could do the hard stuff hard. But then if you feel like you aren't really challenged, and actually you're finishing these sessions week after week after week, very very not tired, very very not fatigued, then you are probably training a bit too easy, and you could probably do a bit more volume, or you probably train a bit harder. But definitely looking at the aim of each session, and for different athletes, the aims of those sessions will be different depending on who's coaching you, what kind of path you're going down. But you should be able to train consistently is how I'd measure that.
Yeah, exactly. That's something we also talked about in that base training episode, about if you can repeat a similar sort of week in, week out, basically, then that's a good sign that at least you're not going too hard. But as you said, maybe you're going too easy if you're doing that without ever breaking a sweat, of course. But that's generally not the problem, I think. But yeah, having that ability to repeat the same sort of week in, week out, I think that's a really good litmus test for whether you're controlling yourself enough.
It's definitely better to go too easy than too hard. If you go too hard, you put yourself in a hole, you potentially get injured. If you go too easy, then you missed out on that 5% of fitness. But at the end of the day, you can still compete in that race when it comes to it. You're not put yourself on the back foot, and that training you've done still counts. Whereas, if you've gone too hard, a hole, you have to completely back off. So too easy is definitely better than too hard, in my opinion.
Yeah. All right. I think that's mostly it from my side. Do you have anything else you want to add on this?
No, I just say, everyone around the world is pretty much in a similar boat here. Everyone's had races cancelled. Don't really know when their season's going to restart. So just keep positive and go back to the basics, enjoy your training, and then when season does restart, it'll be those athletes who are consistent who will be the best. So enjoy your training and look forward to race season restarting whenever it does.
Yeah, totally agree. And be safe, folks. Take the guidelines that you get from your local authorities seriously. They do the best they can to make sure that this thing stays somewhat under control. So that's it. Thank you, James. We'll just thank our sponsors, Precision Hydration, that you can find on precisionhydration.com. And you can get 15% off their electrolyte products with the promo code ThatTriathlonShow15. And thank you to Roka, that you can find on roka.com/TTS. And that landing page will give you a 20% discount code that you can apply to your order, which can be any combination of wetsuits, tri-suits, swimskins, goggles, and high-performance eyewear on the Roka website. So that's it, and we'll have another interview on Monday, and then a Q&A the following Thursday, and let's hope that this thing blows over sooner rather than later, but if not, control the controllables, and stay positive and enjoy your training, folks.